Ever get the feeling that someone you know is putting on an act?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like their public persona is all smiles and sunshine, but underneath there's something darker lurking.
Right, right, like a hidden side.
Exactly. Today's deep dive is all about that.
Okay.
A case where a seemingly perfect life hides a twisted web of secrets, infidelity, and ultimately murder.
Sounds juicy.
Oh, it is. We're exploring the tragic story of Heather Guerreris, based on a true crime podcast episode.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, the details are as chilling as any fictional thriller.
Wow.
Oh.
So, what's the story here?
Well, on the surface, Heather was described as a model citizen, kind, responsible,
Really?
the type of person who brought homemade cookies to work for her team.
Ah, so like a genuinely good person.
Exactly. She was a devoted single mother to her 9-year-old daughter, Victoria,
Mm-hmm.
and by all accounts, a genuinely good person.
Right. It's just hard to imagine something bad happening to someone like that.
It really is. It's almost unimaginable what happened to her.
Okay, so what did happen?
Imagine this. It's an ordinary evening. Heather is leaving work, chatting with colleagues in the parking lot, when suddenly a figure appears,
Oh, no.
dressed head to toe in black, wearing a mask,
Like a horror movie.
looking like something straight out of a horror movie.
It's chilling.
This masked figure forces Heather to her knees,
Oh my gosh.
utters the words, "You ruined my life," and shoots her twice in the head.
No way.
Right there in the parking lot.
Right there in front of everyone. It's a scene of absolute terror.
I can't even imagine.
And the 911 calls from that night capture the raw panic and confusion of those who witnessed it.
So did they catch the person?
Well, the aftermath is a whirlwind of grief and speculation.
Right.
Who could have committed such a brazen act?
I mean, that takes a certain kind of person to do something like that.
And absolutely. Naturally, suspicion falls on those closest to Heather,
Mm-hmm.
and the investigation quickly zeroes in on her husband, Ignacio Guerreras himself, a police officer.
Okay, so her own husband was a suspect.
Yes. But as the police dig deeper,
They uncover a secret that adds a whole new layer of complexity to the case.
oh boy, a secret. What was it?
They find out that Ig, the seemingly devoted husband,
Mm-hmm.
was actually having an affair with Shawna Nelson, a 911 dispatcher.
So the husband was a cheater.
Wow, that's a twist.
Right. And it wasn't just a fleeting fling. It was a long-term, deeply entangled relationship shrouded in secrecy and deceit.
So he was really living a double life.
Exactly. They used fake names in their phones,
Yeah.
went to elaborate lengths to hide their communication,
Mm-hmm.
and all the while, Ig maintained this facade of a loving husband to Heather.
So two-faced. That's awful.
It really makes you wonder about the masks people wear and the lives they lead when no one is watching.
Yeah, you never really know what's going on behind closed doors, do you?
It's a stark reminder that we never truly know what goes on behind closed doors.
Right.
It's almost like a betrayal on multiple levels.
Like how did it?
Not just of the marital vows, but of the trust and intimacy that should be at the heart of a family. Yeah, you're betraying your whole family, not just your spouse.
Precisely. And this web of deception becomes even more tangled.
Oh, no.
When Shawna gets pregnant, not once, but twice with Ig's child.
What? So there were kids involved? Oh, my God.
It's like something straight out of a soap opera,
It really is.
with each revelation adding another layer of drama and intrigue.
So two families are now caught in this whirlwind
Right.
of infidelity and hidden pregnancies.
Yes.
And what-
How did their spouses not suspect something sooner?
Right. Were there any, like, signs?
Was there any warning signs?
Uh-huh.
Any cracks in this carefully constructed facade?
I mean, people are good at hiding things,
That's true.
but there are usually some clues.
There were subtle clues, of course.
Okay.
The kind that often get overlooked or dismissed in the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
Right. Like what?
Well, Heather had started questioning Ig's late nights and suspicious absences,
That makes sense.
but he always had a plausible excuse ready.
Of course.
And Ken, Shauna's husband, stumbled upon her diary, where she poured out her feelings for Ig.
That's gotta hurt.
It was a moment of truth,
Hmm.
a painful glimpse behind the curtain of their seemingly happy marriage.
So both spouses had some idea that something was going on.
It seems so.
So what happened next?
Well, the truth bomb explodes.
Okay.
And you'd think that would be the end of it, right?
Yeah, you'd think they'd split up and move on.
Both couples would go their separate ways, lick their wounds,
Uh-huh.
and try to move on.
Seems logical.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
But human emotions are rarely that straightforward,
that's for sure.
despite the hurt and betrayal.
Wow.
Both couples, for reasons that remain somewhat unclear, decided to try and salvage their marriages.
Really? So they stayed together?
They did. It's a testament to the complexities of love commitment
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps the fear of starting over.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to walk away from everything you've built together.
It's a decision that's hard to fathom from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I mean, how do you rebuild trust after such a profound breach?
Right. How do you reconcile the image of your spouse with the reality of their actions?
That's a tough one.
Those are exactly the questions that plagued both couples. It was a fragile peace, a truce built on shaky ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't long before the cracks started to show again.
Oh, no. Here we go again.
This time, however, the stakes were even higher with the arrival of baby Christian Ig's son with Shawna.
Oh, wow. So now a child is involved?
Yeah.
This just keeps getting more and more complicated.
Adding another layer of complication to this already tangled situation.
So we have two couples trying to rebuild their lives amidst a wreckage of secrets and betrayal.
Exactly.
And a new baby who is a constant reminder of the affair.
Right. I can't imagine the tension and resentment simmering beneath the surface.
Yeah, you can cut the tension with a knife.
You're right to sense the growing unease.
Okay.
This is where the story takes a darker turn.
Oh, boy. How so?
As Ig, realizing the magnitude of the mess he's created,
Mm-hmm.
decides to end the affair once and for all and focus on repairing his marriage with Heather.
So he finally came to his senses.
It seems like a logical step,
Yeah.
a necessary one,
Right?
but it sets in motion a chain of events that will have devastating consequences.
Uh-oh. This doesn't sound good.
It sounds like we're about to enter a whole new chapter in this saga,
Okay.
one where love and heartbreak morph into something far more sinister.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Buckle up because it's about to get even more intense.
I'm ready.
We left off with Ig trying to extricate himself from the affair and repair his marriage. I imagine that didn't sit well with Shawna.
Oh, no, not at all. It's safe to say that Shawna did not handle the rejection well.
Okay.
In fact, her reaction is a textbook example of how a broken heart, when mixed with a potent dose of obsession, can lead to dangerous and destructive behavior.
So she didn't just accept it and move on.
Nope, not even close. Instead of finding a healthy way to cope with the heartbreak, Shawna becomes fixated on Ig, clinging to the fantasy of their future together. She bombards him with texts and voicemails, pleading for him to come back, professing her undying love,
Okay.
and promising to do anything to make things right.
It's almost like she couldn't grasp the reality of the situation,
Yeah.
that Ig had made his choice and was moving on.
Exactly. That's the insidious nature of obsession.
Right.
It distorts reality, making it difficult for the individual to see the situation clearly. And when Ig remained firm in his decision, refusing to give in to her pleas,
Okay.
Shawna's messages took a darker, more threatening turn.
Oh, no.
She accused him of being manipulated by Heather, threatened to expose their affair to the world,
Wow.
and even went so far as to make veiled threats against Heather's safety.
So it escalated from heartbreak to harassment and threats. That's a huge red flag, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A sign that someone is losing control and might be capable of anything.
Right.
It's a chilling progression, and unfortunately, Ig, blinded by his own guilt
Okay.
and focused on trying to salvage his marriage,
Mm-hmm.
didn't fully grasp the danger of the situation.
So he didn't take her threats seriously.
He didn't. He saw Shawna's behavior as the desperate actions of a woman scorned,
Right.
not as a genuine threat to his wife's well-being.
And what about Heather?
Yeah.
Was she aware of Shawna's increasingly erratic behavior?
Sadly, yes. Shawna didn't limit her harassment to Ig.
Oh, no.
She also targeted Heather, sending her cruel and taunting messages,
What did she say?
reminding her of the affair, and even sending her pictures of baby Christian.
Oh, my God.
A constant reminder of Ig's betrayal.
So she was using the child as a weapon.
It was a deliberate attempt to inflict pain to keep the wound of the affair fresh and festering.
That's awful. It's psychological warfare, isn't it?
It is. Using the child as a weapon to torment Heather. That's just cruel.
It's a tactic often employed by those who feel powerless and desperate.
Right.
By targeting Heather, Shawna was trying to regain some sense of control to make Heather feel as miserable and insecure as she did.
It's a tragic situation all around.
It really is. Two families caught in a web of deceit and betrayal, and now this undercurrent of fear and menace. And then, of course, comes the murder.
Right. The murder of Heather Guerreras was a shocking event.
I can only imagine.
A brutal act of violence that sent ripples of fear and grief through the community.
Such a senseless act.
It was a crime that seemed to defy explanation, at least initially.
Right. Who would do such a thing?
Who could have committed such a heinous act, and why?
Those are the questions everyone was asking.
The obvious suspects, at least at first glance,
Okay.
were the two scorned spouses, Ig, the cheating husband, and Ken, the betrayed husband of Shawna.
So both husbands had motive.
They did. Both had motives, both had access to firearms,
Okay.
and both had a history of volatile behavior.
So the investigation focused on them.
It did. The investigation focused on these two men scrutinizing their alibis, their relationships with Heather, and any potential evidence that might link them to the crime.
Did they find anything?
And it wasn't long before the police uncovered what seemed like a damning piece of evidence.
Okay, what was it?
The getaway vehicle used in the shooting was Ken and Shawna's truck.
So the husband of the other woman, it seems pretty straightforward, right?
On the surface, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And the evidence pointing to Ken became even stronger when the police discovered that the Grim Reaper,
The masked figure?
the masked figure who shot Heather, was wearing Ken's clothes.
Wow, like what?
His socks, his underwear, even his favorite fishing hat.
So it was definitely him.
It was a detail that seemed to seal his fate.
But you said on the surface, I'm sensing another twist coming.
You're good at this.
Right.
While the physical evidence seemed to point unequivocally to Ken,
Right.
there were inconsistencies that troubled the investigators.
Likewise.
Specifically, eyewitness accounts from that night described the shooter's voice and movements as distinctly feminine.
So Ken's truck, Ken's clothes, but a woman behind the mask. Now that's a head scratcher.
It is. Precisely. And to add another layer of complexity, DNA evidence found on the bullet casings,
Okay.
though partially damaged, suggested a female perpetrator as well.
So the evidence is pointing in two different directions.
It was a puzzle that seemed to defy logic, a case where the evidence was leading in two opposite directions.
Okay, hold on. We have Ig, who seemed to have moved on from the affair and was trying to repair his marriage.
Right.
Then we have Ken, whose truck and clothes were used in the crime, but whose physical characteristics don't match the witness descriptions.
Uh-huh.
And we have Shawna, who was clearly obsessed with Ig and had made threats against Heather,
Right.
but who seemingly had no way to access Ken's belongings.
You've laid out the puzzle pieces beautifully. The question now becomes, how do these seemingly disparate pieces fit together?
Yeah, who had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to commit this crime?
It sounds like we're about to enter a whole new realm of possibilities,
It does.
where assumptions are challenged and the truth is far more intricate than it initially appears.
Okay, I'm ready for the next layer.
Get ready, because we're about to delve into a world of manipulation, hidden agendas, and a level of deception that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this case.
Okay, so we have a crime scene that seemingly points to Ken, but with whispers of a woman's involvement. Did investigators start to consider Shawna more seriously at this point?
Oh yeah, definitely. The conflicting evidence forced them to take a closer look at Shawna and her potential role in the murder. Remember, Heather had confided in friends and family about her fear of Shawna,
Right.
expressing concerns about her increasingly erratic behavior and threats.
So the seeds of doubt about Ken were sown. But how could Shawna, a 911 dispatcher with no apparent connection to Ken's belongings, pull off such an elaborate scheme?
That's where the investigation took a truly fascinating turn. Investigators started to entertain a theory that while Wilde fit the seemingly contradictory evidence,
Okay, what's that?
Shawna might have meticulously framed Ken for the murder.
Well, hold on. Framed him, but why go to such lengths?
Remember, Shawna was deeply obsessed with Ig. Her world revolved around him, and she couldn't fathom a life without him. By framing Ken, she would not only eliminate Heather, the obstacle standing in the way of her reunion with Ig,
Okay.
but also ensure that Ken, as the supposed murderer, would be out of the picture permanently. It was a twisted plan,
Wow.
but one that in her distorted mind would pave the way for her happily ever after with Ig.
It's a chilling thought to be so consumed by obsession that you'd resort to framing someone for murder. But wouldn't there be holes in her plan?
Sure.
Surely someone would notice the inconsistencies, the things that didn't quite add up.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, there were cracks in her facade. Remember those men's shoes found near the crime scene?
Yeah.
They were too big for Ken, suggesting someone with smaller feet like a woman's was wearing them. It was a small detail, but a crucial one that started to unravel Shawna's carefully constructed narrative.
The devil is in the details, as they say.
There.
So how did investigators finally catch up with Shawna and expose her scheme?
It was a combination of meticulous police work and a stroke of sheer coincidence. The police, now suspecting Shawna, put out an alert for her in the truck. And who do you think stumbled upon Shawna in the truck while on patrol?
I don't know who.
None other than Ken himself. Imagine the shock, the confusion, the sheer disbelief of finding your wife,
Wow.
the woman you thought you knew, in the middle of this unfolding drama.
What a twist to fate. It sounds like something out of a movie script.
It was a scene straight out of a crime drama. Ken, overwhelmed with emotion, confronted Shawna, demanding to know what she had done.
Did she confess?
His reaction was so intense, so full of raw anguish, that his partner feared he might harm her and had to intervene.
So Shawna was arrested, but did she confess to the crime? Did she break down and admit to framing Ken?
Not initially. She clung to her fabricated story, claiming she had simply gone out to buy wine, explaining the presence of the truck. As for the Grim Reaper costume, she claimed it was an old Halloween outfit.
A Halloween costume in January. Seems like a pretty flimsy excuse.
It was a desperate attempt to deflect blame, a sign that she was starting to realize the walls were closing in. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source.
Ooh.
Michelle Moore, Shawna's best friend and a fellow police officer. During interrogation, Michelle revealed that Shawna had confided in her about wanting to kill Heather, even seeking advice on how to commit the crime and frame someone else.
Wow, talk about a betrayal. The best friend of fellow officers sworn to uphold the law was complicit in this plot.
It's a shocking revelation, and one that speaks to the powerful influence of loyalty even when it's misplaced. Michelle's confession was the final nail in Shawna's coffin. With her carefully crafted web of lies exposed, she had no choice but to face the consequences of her actions.
So what was the outcome of the trial? Was justice served?
The trial was a media spectacle, with the courtroom packed with reporters and curious onlookers eager to witness the unraveling of this twisted tale. Shawna, desperate to salvage her reputation and avoid a life behind bars, concocted an elaborate defense.
What was it?
Claiming that Michelle had fabricated the entire story out of revenge for a broken-off lesbian affair.
Another twist. She really tried to deflect blame, didn't she?
It was a last-ditch effort to sow doubt in the minds of the jury, to paint herself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. But the evidence was overwhelming.
Right.
The incriminating text messages, the witness testimonies, the ill-fitting shoes, and most importantly, Michelle's compelling testimony all pointed to Shawna's guilt.
So the jury saw through her charade.
They did. After deliberating for just one day, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. Shawna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A stark reminder that actions have consequences no matter how meticulously planned or cleverly disguised.
What about Michelle? What happened to the best friend who betrayed her oath and helped orchestrate this tragedy?
As part of a plea deal, Michelle was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 9 years in prison, the maximum penalty for her involvement. It was a harsh sentence, but one that reflected the gravity of her actions and the devastating consequences of her choices.
This case is a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, obsession, grief, and ultimately a sense of justice, however bittersweet. It's a story that reminds us that the line between love and hate, sanity and madness, can be terrifyingly thin.
It's a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even those closest to us can harbor dark secrets. It's a cautionary tale about the destructive power of obsession and the importance of recognizing the warning signs before it's too late.
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard the details. A story that prompts us to reflect on our own relationships, our choices, and the fragility of the lives we build. If there's one thing we can take away from this deep dive, it's the importance of open communication, trust, and seeking help when those foundations start to crumble.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of a complex and tragic case. We hope it sparked some reflection and perhaps even some crucial conversations.
And if you found this exploration of human nature and the dark side of relationships compelling, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more captivating stories and insightful analysis. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.